It is everyone's favorite part of the format, the Banlist predictions. And today we are starting with the low-hanging fruit, potentially the number one card to be banned, and that is Fabled Lori. And now, as players know, the Fiendsmith engine has been insane ever since its release, and has been included in almost all of the top decks, and that is because with the tracks being able to discard the Lori, summon it back, and link right into Requiem without even using your normal summon, we are seeing that this combo is what all the meta players have been flocking to ever since its release. And honestly, it's time to go. And it would not surprise me if Konami hits Fabled Lori outright with a straight ban. And honestly, after its reprint in one of the most recent rarity collections, it would not be out of hand because we know this is straight out of Konami's playbook. Reprint a card massively, let you buy it up, and then hit the problem card itself altogether. So Fabled Lori, it is time to go. But that brings us to our second card on the forbidden list, and that is Secret Village of the Spellcasters. And now we see in alternate formats that Secret Village has already been hit, and that is because a lot of decks, including, that like Exodia, have been going into a quick spellcaster that can block with an Omni Negate, and then a Secret Village to lock down all spells altogether. So we're seeing that this card's not really used in any normal balanced method, and that is why it would not surprise me if Konami preemptively hits Secret Village of the Spellcasters before we see it just become another problem card, another format later. But that leads us to the last card on the forbidden list, and honestly, one that a lot of players might get angry about, and that is the Nightmare Griffin. And that's because in Malice, we see Nightmare Griffin has been kind of a problem card altogether. We see that you link climb into the Griffin, set one of the back rows, and then you'll link right into the A-Bow, reviving the Griffin itself. And then because it's revived from the graveyard, you put it in that nice useful link arrow spot where all your monster effects will go off, but your opponents will be cut off. And honestly, this would not surprise me at all if Konami hits the Nightmare Griffin. Not only does it prevent special summon monsters on the board from activating their effects unless they're linked, but you can also set any trap card from the graveyard. And we've seen combos time after time set things like Eradicator Epidemic Virus, Dimensional Barrier, or even one-ofs like Tikaboo or Gozen Match. And it is for these reasons I do believe we're going to be seeing Konami put Nightmare Griffin on the forbidden list. But we're going to move into the limited list and starting with one of the most impactful cards of the format, and that is Bestial Druisworm. And now, the Bestial package has been a powerhouse in the metagame ever since their release, and at the time they seemed almost like a necessity, and that is because they were one of the only hand traps that could deal with the power of the tier limits. And honestly, any other hand trap just didn't seem strong enough. And that is why the Bestials reigned supreme during that format, and even though the tier limits have been hit, the Bestials have kept going. And even though we saw an early hit to the Bestial Magna Hut, many players even said at the time it still wasn't enough and that Bestial Druisworm would be hit in the future. And that is because not only do we see their insane removal from the graveyard, like we saw the tier limits were broken and that was fine. Hitting them out of the graveyard was nice, but half the time their effects were still going off. But in today's format, we have a lot of light and darks that are just the targets in the graveyard, like the Lori, the Engraver, things like that. So once they're banished from the graveyard, not only does one of your effects normally fizzle, but half the time that target being gone shuts down the combo altogether. So not only do the Bestials half the time prevent a card from going through because the target is removed, but that target being gone has insane impacts for the rest of the game. And then on top of that, you are now summoning a 2500 attack level 6 dragon straight to the board. That's dark, by the way, so you can virus it. And then each of them have nutty effects. The Magna Hut searches. The Bestial Druisworm will spot remove if sent to the graveyard, which is insane. And then we even have the Baldrake, which will do some spot removal as well. So all the Bestials are nutty. And honestly, when we see things like Eldritch getting support, it almost doesn't seem like enough when you can just simply use a Druisworm, banish it from the graveyard, summon the Druisworm, and then have another spot removal, even though they've lost pretty much half their boss monsters from their deck just from that alone. So Bestial Druid Swarm, definitely going to 1 in the future format. But let's go to something that some other players might feel a little bit differently about. And honestly, I hope this isn't something Konami does, but I just don't trust Konami. And that is Pressured Planet Ratesoth going to 1. And I do believe this is going to be happening because we do see once in a while the cashiers do float to the top of the metagame. And a lot of the times that is because of Unicorn. And I don't think that Konami would hit Unicorn outright altogether. I think they would hit the Pressured Planet because this is the card that allows you to add the most amount of consistency to the deck. Because even if you open up with the Unicorn, this can still allow you to search things like the Fenrir, so the Birth is active. And then on top of that, has pretty nice effects also. And we do see time and time again that Konami tends to push players off of decks, so they're kind of forced to adapt into the new metagame, and it wouldn't surprise me if Konami does that with the Pressured Planet itself. And then the last card on the limited list is a card a lot of players have been talking about for honestly a few lists here, and that is Heavy Storm. And now I almost feel kind of like Copium at this point because again, it has been a few formats that this has been unbanned in the OCG, and players are like, yo, when is it coming to the TCG? And I wouldn't be surprised if it is sooner rather than later, especially with all the trap support we are looking forward to in the future with the Odeon support or the Elich support. So Heavy Storm going to 1 in the TCG is not out of hand to be thinking of in the near future. But moving to the semi-limited section, we're going to go to something a little bit spicier, and that is Infernity Launcher. And now I know some players out there might have just been like, yo, that's a little much. But we see over in the OCG that Launcher and the Archfiend are both at 3. And with the Archfiend newly reprinted in the Rarity Collection as Quarter Century Secret, it would not surprise me if we see Infernities get a little love in the future, and that includes Launcher going to 2. And now I know some of the Infernity combos might be a little scary to some players out there, especially if you lived through the Infernity formats, but I do assure you it would be nice for Launcher to come back to 2, for Infernities to even attempt to keep up with the current metagame. But now we're going to move to something that I might get a little heat for in the comments, and that's alright, but that is Fiendsmith Engraver to 2. And now I know there's some players out there that don't think that's enough. They just want this thing at 1 or banned. That's not going to happen, I don't believe. I think to 2 is fair enough. I don't think they're going to be killing this combo out altogether. They obviously want to generate some revenue off of it in the near future, in the future tins. We know how Konami does. So I do believe Fiendsmith Engraver could potentially go to 2. And a lot of this is because right now, even with the Bestios floating around like they are, it still doesn't seem as powerful enough with the Engraver at 3, because even if one gets pitched, half the time another one will get sent from a different card effect, and as we know, a lot of this deck does recycle, so having 3 is almost redundant, and having 2 makes it where hitting it out of the graveyard matters a little bit more, and they have to be a little bit more careful about having the quick effects of the Bestials in the opponent's hand. So Engraver to 2, definitely something that could be happening, especially if they do not hit the Lori. Now, do I think they're going to hit the Lori and Engraver to 2? Potentially not on the same list unless they really want to be pushing players off of this into other decks like the Malice. So Fiendsmith Engraver is definitely a card I could see going to 2 in the near future. But keeping with that meta hits, we're going to be seeing Ice Ryziel to 2 as well. And now I know a lot of Ryziel decks have Fiendsmith in the main deck as well, so this might see like a double hit to the deck. And it is. But Ice Ryziel, we see time and time again, is actually a very powerful not only starter, but extender. And a lot of the cards in this deck are extenders as well. So having the Ice being hit outright 2-2 kind of cuts down the consistency, as well as allows you to read their plays a little bit more with knowing where to interact with your hand traps. And I also want to note, Ice Ryziel as the starter is what keeps them not locked into that rank 4 engine. And that is why if they're relying on the Node or the X Ryziel as a starter, they're going to be locked in the rank 4s. And that is ultimately important when we're talking about the combos they do with the Fiendsmith engine. So Ice going to 2, having to potentially end some of the matches rely on the other Ryzios as starters, locking them into that engine, is something Konami could definitely do to trim the deck down, but by no means stop it in its tracks. And now, keeping the cards going to 2 is another card that a lot of players have been hoping for ever since it went over in the OCG, and that is Change of Heart. And I've been saying a lot of times on this channel that Change of Heart coming to 2 is ultimately good for the game. As many go second cards as we can get is important, and honestly, Change of Heart 2/2 just for that side deck, helping you out going second against an already established board, searching it off thrust, definitely good for the game. Mind Control is powerful. We see Brain Control's a flop at this point, almost needs a retrain. Change of Heart to 2 is a welcomed change by the community. And then the last card to go to 2 potentially is Into the Void. We see Upstart at 3, and honestly, the drawback for that isn't as important. Yes, that 1,000 does matter when you're going into time, but Into the Void makes it where you have to have 3 cards in your hand just to activate it, and then during the end phase, you discard the entire hand. So unless you're playing things like Infernities, which we did just mention, this is probably not going to be played in a lot of decks, and again, unless it's like some weird FTK deck. So Into the Void 2/2, honestly, I think can be happening in the metagame. But moving on to the actual potentially last card on the semi-limited list, I want to ask, do you think Maxi is going to be coming off the list? Because with the most recent printing of it coming up in the rarity collection, a lot of players are kind of wondering, is this just for Edison? Or are we kind of expected to be seeing it in the TCG? So I'm not saying it's coming unbanned. I've been kind of harping on this for quite some time. All the viewers know where I stand on that. But I do want to ask for the viewers, what do you think of Maxi in the rarity collection? Is it just for the Edison players, just blinging out the binder? Or are Mole Charmies not enough in the metagame and we need a little bit of love from the bug? But moving into the unlimited section of the list, we have the all-important Cyberjar. I know. Honestly, it went to 2. It'd be cool if someone played this card. It really isn't going to be hyped up that much. So Cyberjar 2/3, be pretty interesting. But moving into something that always gets me a little hate, it is Naturia Sacred Tree. And as always, I want to say Naturia Sacred Tree was hit way before it needed to be hit, because it didn't, and that's because players just hate Runic, which, by the way, where's that performing now? Honestly, I should have had some Runic cards on here. All of that should go to 3. Let me say that. All the Runics, 2/3 as well with the Naturia Sacred Tree, okay? I'm kind of joking, but honestly, they need some love. Sacred Tree to 3, so if you hate that, or the Max C call, let me know in the comments below. But if you loved that, you'll love this even more, because the next card I do believe will be going unlimited is Reasoning. And now I would like to note, it's pretty much between Reasoning or Monster Gate, but Infernoids need love. And Reasoning, Monster Gate, we even have the Grass, all in the OCG, not causing as many problems as you would actually think. Yeah, there's a few Wombo combo decks that kind of appear, but again, with the current meta game we're in, those almost aren't even consistent enough to be considering, okay? So again, Reasoning, 2/3, something I've been hoping for quite some time, and again, it was in the rarity collection, so we have all sorts of beautiful forms of it to be using, and it'd be a shame just to be restricted down to 1. And I have to ask, are you tired of losing to Blue Eyes? Because if you check out our How to Beat Blue Eyes up above, then you will never lose to that deck ever again. And if you subscribe to the channel, you will never miss another video. But most importantly, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.